They say money can't buy happiness, but let me tell you something. It can certainly buy the most exquisite revenge. My name is Ethel Serafina Coleman, and at 70 years old, I learned that sometimes the best disguise is poverty, and the sweetest justice comes wrapped in silk. You're probably wondering how a grandmother in discount store clothing could orchestrate one of the most satisfying comeuppances I've ever witnessed. Well, settle in, because this story isn't just about revenge. It's about discovering who people really are when they think no one important is watching. And sometimes, the most important person in the room is the one everyone assumes matters the least. The day I buried my beloved Elias, I wore a simple black dress. Nothing flashy, nothing that would draw attention away from honoring my husband of 45 years. I wanted to grieve quietly, surrounded by family and friends who had come to pay their respects to a man who had built an empire from nothing but determination and love. But grief has a way of making you vulnerable, and vultures have a way of sensing weakness. I was standing by Elias's casket, my heart heavy with 45 years of memories, when I heard the whispers behind me. Sharp, cutting words that sliced through the church's hushed reverence like a blade through silk. Would you look at that dress? I swear Marcus's mother has no class whatsoever. I turned slightly, recognizing my daughter-in-law Tiffany's voice, though I'd never heard it drip with such venom before. I work in high-end fashion, she continued, her voice growing louder, more confident. That thing she's wearing couldn't have cost more than $50. At her own husband's funeral. It's embarrassing, really. Someone should tell her that just because you're poor doesn't mean you have to look it. The congregation was beginning to stare. Not at the casket, not in remembrance of Elias, but at me. At my supposedly shameful appearance. At the woman Tiffany was painting as a charity case, a burden on her successful son. Honestly, Marcus, Tiffany's voice carried across the entire church now. Your mother's complete lack of style is becoming a real problem. When we go out together, I'm mortified. She dresses like she shops at thrift stores. I felt every eye in that church on me. Felt the weight of their judgment, their pity, their secondhand embarrassment for my son who had to claim me as family. In that moment, standing beside my husband's casket, I wasn't grieving for Elias anymore. I was burning with a humiliation so deep it took my breath away. But here's what Tiffany didn't know, what none of them knew. That cheap dress she was mocking. It was a limited edition piece from Valdirini's spring collection. It cost $80,000. And the woman she was calling classless, I owned the very boutique chain where she worked her little sales associate job, along with 37 others just like it. You might think that after such public humiliation, I would have marched right up to Tiffany and set the record straight, revealed my wealth, put her in her place, reclaimed my dignity in front of all those witnesses. But Elias hadn't built our empire by acting on impulse. He'd taught me that the most devastating moves are the ones your opponent never sees coming. So instead of striking back immediately, I did what any good strategist does. I gathered intelligence. Within a week of the funeral, I had my assistant Rebecca compile a complete dossier on Tiffany Walsh Coleman. What I discovered painted a picture of a woman living far beyond her means and treating others with the same cruelty she'd shown me. The boutique where Tiffany worked, my boutique, had been receiving customer complaints about her for months. She was rude to anyone she deemed beneath her, which apparently included anyone who couldn't afford the most expensive items in the store. She'd been telling customers she was the assistant manager, a promotion that existed only in her imagination. She'd even been accepting gifts from male customers in exchange for employee discounts, a practice that violated about 6 different company policies. But the real revelation was her financial situation. Despite working a retail job that paid $45,000 a year, Tiffany was living like she made 10 times that amount. Designer handbags, expensive jewelry, a luxury car lease she could barely afford, all financed through credit cards and personal loans that were spiraling toward disaster. Was drowning in debt while playing the role of a fashion expert, criticizing others for their supposed lack of style while her own lifestyle was built on. Borrowed money and borrowed credibility. The irony was delicious, but it wasn't enough. Not yet. 3 weeks after the funeral, I walked into the Valderini boutique on Fifth Avenue. I'd taken care to dress exactly as Tiffany expected, discount store cardigan, sensible shoes, a handbag that had seen better years. I looked like someone who'd wandered in by mistake, someone who couldn't possibly afford anything in that gleaming temple of high fashion. The security cameras were recording. Of course, I made sure of that. Rebecca had already alerted the head of security that there might be an incident requiring documentation. What they were about to witness would become evidence in Tiffany's termination hearing. I approached the section where Tiffany was arranging scarves, each one worth more than most people's monthly salary. She looked up at me with barely concealed disdain, her expression suggesting I'd tracked mud across her precious sales floor. "Can I help you?" she asked, her tone making it clear that helping me was the last thing she wanted to do. "I'm looking for something special," I said, keeping my voice small, apologetic. "My son is getting a promotion at work, and I wanted to buy something nice for his wife." Tiffany's eyes lit up with cruel amusement. "Oh, how sweet. What's your budget?" Well, I hesitated, playing the part perfectly. I was hoping to spend maybe $200. The laugh that escaped her was sharp enough to cut glass. 200? Oh, honey, you're in the wrong store. This is Valderini, not Target. Our scarves start at 800. She said it loud enough for other customers to hear, ensuring maximum humiliation. Several people turned to look at me with expressions ranging from pity to annoyance. But maybe, I pressed on, there's something on sale? Something from last season? Listen, Tiffany leaned closer, her voice dripping with condescension. I don't think you understand where you are. This isn't the kind of place where people like you shop. These are investment pieces for women who understand quality. Maybe try the department store down the street. They have a clearance section. I let my face crumple slightly as if her words had wounded me. I just wanted something beautiful for my daughter-in-law. She has such exquisite taste in fashion. Well, if she has good taste. She know the difference between real luxury and whatever you can afford. Tiffany replied, not even trying to lower her voice now. Trust me, you'll embarrass yourself and disappoint her if you try to shop here. Other customers were staring openly now. A few looked uncomfortable with Tiffany's treatment of me, but none intervened. After all, I was just some confused old woman who'd wandered into the wrong store. Maybe I could just look around. I asked meekly. Tiffany's patience finally snapped. Look, ma'am, I'm trying to be nice here, but you're wasting my time and frankly, you're making other customers uncomfortable. This is a high-end establishment and we cater to a certain clientele. You clearly don't belong here. Perfect. Absolutely perfect. Every word was being recorded. Every moment of cruelty captured in high definition. That's when Rebecca walked through the door. My assistant is an elegant woman in her 40s who could give any fashion model a run for her money. She was dressed impeccably, as always, in one of our newest designs. Every eye in the store turned to watch her approach, including Tiffany's. Mrs. Coleman, Rebecca said warmly, ignoring Tiffany's shocked expression at hearing my name. I'm so sorry I'm late. Traffic was impossible. Tiffany's face went pale. Coleman wasn't exactly a common name, and she knew her husband Marcus's mother was Mrs. Coleman, but surely this couldn't be ... quote, Rebecca. Dear, meet my daughter-in-law, Tiffany, I said, my voice still gentle but carrying a new authority. Tiffany, This is Rebecca Martinez, my executive assistant. The color drained from Tiffany's face completely now. Executive assistant to whom? Her mind was working frantically, trying to piece together a puzzle she desperately didn't want to solve. Mrs. Coleman, Rebecca continued, shall we begin the store inspection? I have the quarterly reports ready for your review, and the staff evaluation forms are prepared. The entire boutique fell silent. Even customers stopped their conversations to listen. Tiffany's voice came out as barely a whisper. Store ... Inspection? Asterisk. I straightened slightly, letting the mask of confusion and meekness fall away. When I spoke again, my voice carried the authority of someone who'd spent decades building an empire. Yes, Tiffany. Store inspection? You see, this is my store. This entire chain is my store. Valterini Holdings belongs to me, as does every boutique, every employee contract, and every security camera that just recorded your performance. The silence in that store was deafening. Tiffany's mouth opened and closed like a fish gasping for air. This dress you mocked at my husband's funeral, I continued, touching the fabric of my black outfit, was an $80,000 exclusive from our private collection. These shoes you called sensible? They're handmade Italian leather worth more than your monthly salary. And this handbag that's seen better years? It's a vintage piece worth more than your car. Tiffany sank onto one of the velvet chairs we kept for customers, her face white as marble. But more importantly, I said, my voice growing firmer, you've just demonstrated exactly why you're no longer employed here. Rebecca, please show Miss Walsh the documentation of customer complaints. The evidence of her fraudulent claims about promotions she never received, and the violations of company policy regarding personal conduct with customers. Rebecca produced a thick folder with the efficiency of someone who'd been preparing for this moment. It's all here, Mrs. Coleman, along with the financial audit showing discrepancies in her sales reports. I looked around the store, addressing not just Tiffany, but everyone who was watching. You know what's truly expensive? Cruelty. Treating people poorly based on assumptions about their worth. Looking down on others because you think you're better than them. That kind of behavior costs more than any piece of clothing in the store. What happened next was swift and decisive. Tiffany was terminated immediately, of course. The security footage of her treatment of me and our investigation revealed many other customers became part of her permanent employment record. In an industry built on relationships and reputation, word travels fast, but the real aftermath began 3 days later. When I invited my children Marcus and Belle to dinner, they arrived expecting our usual modest meal in my small apartment. Instead, they found Rebecca waiting to escort them to my penthouse across town, the one they'd never known existed. Mom? Marcus's voice was small, confused, like a child who discovered his bedroom was actually a movie set. Sit down, both of you, I said gently. It's time you knew the truth about your father's business empire. Our business empire? The next hour was spent explaining 30 years of deliberate secrecy. How Elias and I had built a fashion empire worth over $200 million. How we'd lived modestly, not out of necessity, but by choice. How we'd wanted our children to learn the value of work, of treating people with respect, of understanding that wealth was a responsibility, not a right to look down on others. But Mom, Belle whispered, why hide it from us? Because look what wealth without wisdom did to your sister-in-law, I replied. She worked at the bottom of our empire but thought she was at the top of the world. She had access to beautiful things but couldn't see the beauty in treating people with kindness. I wanted you both to understand that respect isn't something you buy, it's something you earn. Marcus was quiet for a long time. Finally, he spoke. I need to divorce her, don't I? That's your decision, son. But you need to decide what kind of man you want to be and what kind of values you want to pass on to any children you might have. 6 months later, Marcus was working as a floor salesman at one of our boutiques. Not because he had to, but because he chose to. He wanted to learn the business from the ground up, to understand what it meant to serve customers with grace and dignity, regardless of their appearance or apparent means. I watched him one day through the security monitors, helping an elderly man find a gift for his wife's birthday. The man was dressed simply, spoke quietly, seemed uncertain about being in such an upscale store. But Marcus treated him like royalty, taking time to understand what he wanted, helping him find something perfect within his budget, never once making him feel less than welcome. The elderly man spent $300 on a scarf. What Marcus didn't know, what he couldn't have known, was that the man was a prominent art dealer whose wife ended up loving the gift so much she became one of our best customers, bringing in over $50,000 in business over the following year. That's the thing about treating people well. You never know what kind of returns it might bring. But more importantly, it's just the right thing to do. A year after that day in the boutique, I received an unexpected phone call. Tiffany's voice was different, quieter, more thoughtful. "Mrs. Coleman? It's Tiffany. I know I probably have no right to call you, but I wanted to thank you." I listened as she told me about the past year. How losing her job had forced her to confront her debts, her attitude, her whole way of looking at the world. How she'd taken a position at a nonprofit, helping women re-enter the workforce after difficult circumstances. How she'd learned to find satisfaction in helping others rather than looking down on them. "I was drowning in debt and arrogance," she said. "What you did, it was harsh, but I needed it. I needed to see myself clearly. I needed to understand that how I treated people said everything about who I was and nothing about who they were." After we hung up, I sat in my penthouse looking out over the city where Elias and I had built our dreams. The Empire State Building glittered in the distance, surrounded by millions of lights representing millions of lives, each one valuable, each one worthy of respect. The truth is, I could have revealed my wealth at any time. I could have avoided that humiliation at Elias's funeral with a single word to my son. But sometimes the most important lessons can only be learned through experience. And sometimes the people who need those lessons most are the ones closest to us. Money doesn't make you better than anyone else. It just gives you more opportunities to show what kind of person you really are. Tiffany learned that the hard way, but she learned it. Marcus learned it by choosing to start over and earn his inheritance through character rather than birthright. And me, I learned that revenge might be sweet, but redemption is even sweeter. That the best way to honor the man who built an empire with me is to use that empire to teach lessons about humanity, dignity, and the true value of treating every person with respect. They say you can't put a price on dignity, but I disagree. Dignity is priceless precisely because it costs nothing to give and everything to take away. In a world obsessed with appearances and assumptions, sometimes the most radical act is simply treating everyone, regardless of their clothes, their car, or their perceived status, as if they matter, because they do. We all do. And that, my dear listeners, is worth more than all the silk scarves and Italian leather shoes in the world. The next time you see someone who looks like they don't belong, remember my story. Remember that appearances can deceive, that assumptions can wound, and that kindness costs nothing but pays dividends you can't imagine. Remember that the person you dismiss as unimportant might just be the most important person in the room. And remember that true wealth isn't what you wear or where you shop or how much money you have in the bank. True wealth is how you treat people when you think no one is watching, because someone always is, even if it's just your own conscience. Keeping track of who you really are when the masks come off, that's my story. That's my revenge. And that's my gift to anyone wise enough to listen.